everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Blockchain Gamer.biz's weekly roundup where we cover the latest news in blockchain gaming. Today is Friday, the 16th of February. I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John. How's it going?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Good. So to start things off, make sure you check out our website at blockchaingamer.biz for all of the articles and news features and interviews over the week, and our Twitter, BCGBiz, and you can also connect with us on LinkedIn. So we have got quite a lot of funding news this week, over 20 million in fact, which is not sort of an everyday week thing in Web3 gaming. We have Overworld, which raised 10 million. So instead of sort of going through all the headlines, let's start off with that one and then we'll move on to the next one. So can you tell us about Overworld? Exterios, sort of anime themed RPG. They did mint, didn't they? Quite a high profile NFT.
Yes, it's sort of we're definitely in this market at the moment. I guess some general context. So Bitcoin's gone over $50,000 this week. So everything's sort of going up. People are starting to talk about we're in a bull market now. I mean, it's not as there's no technical way of defining a bull market, so everyone sort of makes up their own thing. But I guess if enough people say we're in a bull market, 51% of people say we're in a bull market, I guess we probably are. I sort of definitely feel we're in that sort of situation at the moment where just generally there's a lot of sort of NFT mints are selling out. There's a lot of airdrop stuff happening. There's Solana's phone. They couldn't sell. I can't remember. They couldn't sell 10,000 of the first one, and they've done 100,000 pre-orders of the second one. That's not out for a year. And so just all this sort of stuff is all very sort of I call it sort of frothy. And obviously that's sort of the cycle you get. Last year 2023 was pretty awful. Some of 2022 was pretty awful as well. So there's a lot of sort of pent up enthusiasm and sort of stuff like Bitcoin ETFs sort of seem to be bringing new money in, and the Bitcoin halving's happening as well. So everyone's sort of happy. So that's the general sort of situation. I will talk a little bit.
No definition, sort of official definition of what a bull market is.
Not as far as I know. I mean, I think in stocks there may be some sort of, like a recession for a country is 2 quarters, so basically 6 months of falling GDP. So it's sort of funny now. I notice people start talking about there's a headline yesterday. The UK is in a technical recession. It's like, well, recession is a technical word. I mean, that's what it is. It's like,
no other recession
is recession. So we actually do have this other weird thing as well. That a lot of Japan's in a recession as well. So we've got this sort of weird sort of stuff going on where markets are generally, crypto markets are very bullish. Stock markets are hitting all-time highs. So the Chinese stock market, the Japanese stock market pretty much hit an all-time high, and it's the economy's in recession, which doesn't sort of happen very, very often. So we'll see how that all decouples, I suppose, over the next 6 months. But it's so the funding for Overworld, like all funding, having seen how the sausage is made when it comes to sort of funding, these processes can take many months. So from a company starting to talk to investors and actually announcing something, can be 6 months, easily 2 or 3 months minimum. It's not like the money. It's not like the sort of the money dropped. It's not like it's a bull market now, and now we're getting all these funding rounds. Actually, we're still funding-wise, we're still pretty low. So I've been putting some figures out, and so in January this year, there was $63 million announced that I could see. But in January 2023, there was $139 million. So even though we're sort of in a bull market, the sort of the announced sort of funding is still, it's half of what it was last year, and last year wasn't great. In 2022, $508 million. So we're miles under, 2%. No, 10. No, about 12%. So anyway, I'm waffling around. So the thing about Overworld is, I'd almost say, with my contrary hat on, I'd almost say it's a surprise that it's not more money, really. I mean, I'm trying I'm trying a little bit desperate there. But so Overworld is a studio based in Florida, from a team of people who know how to make games. But if you take a step back, they're actually a part of a studio called Exterio. And Exterio itself is sort of a sort of blockchain. It's not a blockchain gaming platform. I'm not quite sure what blockchain it's sort of running on. It may be running on its own thing. It's not very clear. I don't think it is. But it's sort of equally, if you take a step back from that, it's sort of funded by this, not exclusively, but it's funded by this well-known Chinese game developer called FunPlus. That was a very, very big free-to-play mobile developer. So I don't know sort of technically. I think they're separate companies, but like the CTO of FunPlus left to join Exterio, and Exterio was the lead investor. FunPlus was the lead investor into Exterio, so you sort of like nested dolls. So Overworld is one part of this thing that's already well funded, and Overworld got $3 million in 2023 in funding, and so this $10 million is sort of no great surprise. That it's sort of done that, and it's sort of got a good selection of companies who are funding it, sort of known investors in the space. As you say, the Overworld sort of gained prominence at the end of last year when it did this Incarna NFT drop, and that was just at the point where NFT drops were getting hot again, and Overworld sort of played its hand very well to sort of ride that. And at one point, it's a 10,000 PFP collection, typical sort of thing. I think it was sort of a free mint, and at one point they were 2.4 ETH, so pretty big. They're down to about 1.4 now. But the interesting thing was that they were sort of promoted these NFTs. Obviously, the point will be they'll have some functionality. They'll sort of lead into the game, early access, all that sort of stuff. But also, there is this expectation that Overworld is going to have a token drop. A token, a token will become available in certain ways, and so people, as sort of happened with stuff like grapes, previous to that, the NFTs were getting inflated prices because people were sort of thinking, oh, I buy one of these, I'll get $1 million of tokens or something, and Overworld sort of played that line, sort of saying you'll get rewarded for this sort of thing, but it didn't sort of go say you're going to get tokens because that'll be a security, and they get done in the States for that. So they sort of rode that sort of line, and they rode it well. So in a sense, all that's done is built up expectation. I imagine this funding round is probably a token round. So these people are buying tokens at a discount to what the token price will be. Obviously, there'll be vesting in there, or you assume there'll be vesting, which means the investors don't get the tokens straight away. They may get some of the tokens after 6 months, and then every month get a bit more for 2 years or something. That's a typical sort of thing. So it very much plays into the sort of situation we're at the moment. The really weird thing about Overworld, and it has started to be mentioned a little bit, is we sort of have very scant information about the game. So the PFPs are, I would say, very Azuri type, inspired. So that sort of anime type Japanese thing. Azuri is the biggest PFP collection, in that style. They sort of popularized it. There's been a whole bunch of copycats after that, none of which have been very successful. So it's an anime styled. They're calling it an MMORPG, as everyone sort of does. They're sort of making the right signals about you sort of go out into the world and loot stuff, and then you come back to your hub and craft and blah blah blah. But there's, as far as I can see, there's been no gameplay footage or even screens or anything like that. So there's a little bit of a sort of black hole into actually what the game's going to be, and that can be dangerous. Obviously, in some ways, it's sort of very good for speculators because speculators can sort of in their own head think this is going to be like World of Warcraft, or it's an anime thing, not a fantasy thing, but they can imagine it's going to be a great success. But actually, for people in the games industry, you realise making those sort of games is like it takes 5 years and it's really really hard, and often they come out and they flop straight away. So I think that's where the disconnect happens between sort of speculators in a bull market who just everything's going to be amazing, and people who've sort of seen this before and just know going to be quite difficult. Although saying that, I mean, the thing we talked about last week was Heroes of Mavia, launched on the app stores, did its airdrop very sort of successfully. The game, I've been playing it pretty heavily. It's not great. It's functional. It's a bit light on features at the moment. There's lots of things you press on, it's just coming soon. There's some really weird cliffs where you need resources and you have to really grind quite hard to get there. But it's functional as a Clash of Clans clone. But the interesting thing is, even though that's happened, the token price has still continued to rise. It's a top 200 crypto at the moment. And that's clearly driven by, and people have started pointing this out now. This is clearly, it's actually someone tried to do a calculation, and it says, you would, at this sort of rate, you would value this game, at about 5% of what its current token cap is, because if this was a Web 2 game, it would be seen as a total failure. They got a million downloads isn't very much, and I think probably a lot of players, my impression is a lot of players have stopped playing, so they've not given out any MAU figures or DAU figures.
As you mentioned, John, you were talking about the kind of total investment so far in 2024, and you did quite an interesting table this week where you sort of highlighted the biggest investors and how many deals have come from that. Can you unpick that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so I've been messing around. I've got a new thing. I've got a new spreadsheet, which I guess we'll put a link in, where I'm sort of just Another one, yeah. Oh dear, a bit obsessed, a bit addicted to spreadsheets. So anyone can look at it, and it's sort of something I'm updating every month, and it's something we'll be using for some other research that we're doing. More on that sort of later. So, but yeah, I was just looking because I do all this stuff anyway, so it's good to let people sort of have a look at a version of it. And it was quite surprising actually, because I say there's not been that many deals. Let's have a quick look. So in terms of, I reckon about 30 deals so far this year. And Animoca Brands, Animoca Ventures, sorry, I should say, has been the most active investor this year with 7 deals. So that's quite a lot. If you think there's 30 being announced, Animoca's been in quite a lot of them. And Animoca tends not to lead rounds, so a lead investor will put the most money in and set up the legal terms, probably value the company or would be involved with negotiating to say what the value of the deal is. So they don't tend to do that, but they do tend to put money in. They tend to put a little bit of money in lots of things. So Polygon Ventures also, they're a bit different because Polygon is obviously a blockchain, so it tends to give out grants in its Matic token rather than sort of invest dollars. There's quite a lot. Sigmund Capital, Merit Circle, Foresight, Spartan Capital, all done 3 deals this year. So it's sort of interesting, and there's quite a lot. So there's about what we've got here, 17 investors that have announced at least 2 deals this year. So it's definitely picking up on that side. We haven't seen massive sort of funding rounds. We haven't seen, let's say, sort of $10 million. $10 million is a lot of money, but it's not like when we saw even like Proof of Play last year did 31 million. When you start to see those bigger.
I'd say at the end of 2023, I just sort of had a sense that it was picking up, and there were quite a few sort of really big ones announced. So maybe they come in sort of like that. They come in chunks. End of 2023. Now it'll be a couple of months, and then we'll see another couple of those really big ones.
Well, the big ones at the end of last year were sort of slightly different sort of rounds. So there was Line Next did this $140 million, but it wasn't from venture capital. It was from private equity, which is a different sort of funding. So it was one company just invested a lot into there, and then you had sort of Nexon invested 100 million into its sort of platform, but that was sort of Nexon raised the money itself, so it wasn't like lots of investors doing that. So we still haven't seen those big rounds from say A16Z, one of the probably the best known VC at the moment in the crypto space, the big US one. They've not done any big game deals. They did the Proof of Play one. They did Azra Games. It's quite, when they tend to go in, they tend to put in 10-20 million themselves. So then obviously the round then gets that much bigger. So as you say, there's sort of quite a lot of stuff going on. Should we quickly run through some of the other ones? So
Pixels announced that Pixels Foundation has raised 4.8 million in funding, but I am not entirely sure what Pixels Foundation actually is, because it just sort of popped up as its own sort of. It's a bit of a Mocha Foundation. That's another sort of thing. What's that? What do you know any more?
Well, a foundation is basically what tends to happen is with blockchain projects that have tokens is they tend to create a separate entity, so a separate legal company from the company who's making the game. So actually, I think for Pixels, the company is called Banger, Banger Inc. I think it's an old company that the CEO Luke had hanging around. I think it's his old company. So technically, in US law, Banger Inc. is the developer of Pixels, but you don't really want to be a US company issuing tokens because of the legislation and stuff. So generally, what people would do for token companies is set up a separate company, which they will call a foundation. Which is that doesn't mean anything magical in and of itself, but they would normally set that up in somewhere like the Cayman Islands or Panama or British Virgin Isles or Seychelles, somewhere. That's where all the crypto companies are set up, because that means you're sort of operating in a more crypto friendly environment where the SEC can't necessarily sort of sue you if they think you've done something wrong. So there's a legal sort of thing there, and what also happens is the foundation can be like a non-profit. So the foundation basically is there to issue tokens. It's not that it doesn't get any sort of revenue from that. It doesn't cash in tokens. It just issues the tokens, and in this case takes money from investors, and that money sort of sits there. And then the foundation technically would then pay, in this case, the developer Banger Inc. for services. So instead of Banger taking the investment money and paying itself, it would sort of do that through the foundation, which makes it a bit more complicated from that point of view, but just gives you a lot more legal flexibility and protection about that. And the other thing, of course, is with the foundation, if people are investing in that, they are getting tokens. That's what they're getting. So I don't know for Overworld, I would imagine that they are getting tokens. They may be getting equity and tokens, but yeah, because tokens are the thing that are hot at the moment now, and obviously tokens are liquid. Under the vetting, I mean, they have to have vetting, vesting sort of terms. But for VCs, normally you invest $1 million in a company, then you have to wait 10 years to see if anyone wants to buy it, sort of thing. Whereas tokens, even if you're waiting like a year for them to vest, you can start selling straight away and start giving money back to your LPs and stuff like that. So tokens are, in a bull market like this, or what's becoming a bull market, tokens are great for investors. So I think we will start to see that stuff sort of picking up, and I think that's why we're also seeing a lot of activity in terms of a lot of investors putting in small amounts of money. So let's say let's have a quick look. So for the Overworld round of 10 million, they announced there were 9 companies publicly announced into that. So probably Hash maybe put in $2 or $3 million into that, and then other people just putting like $500,000, maybe even $250,000. So when you have lots of tokens that are going to vest quickly, lots of people will put in a small amount because they'll go, well, I'll double that money straight away. So it's a different sort of investment process going on there.
Now, Framework was the lead of the Pixels investment, and they were also the lead of the fairly sort of buzzy AI arena that was announced earlier, like one of the first investments that was announced this year.
Yeah. So I mean, Framework are a pretty highly regarded crypto investor. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of they're sort of
then Ultiverse, if that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure. They raised $4 million through a private token sale, led by IDG Capital and Animoca Brands. There we saw, and Polygon Ventures, Morningstar. Those were all involved in the funding as well. Now, this brings the total of funding over 20 million from the studio, but quite confusingly, they posted on Twitter like an image that suggests that there were investors on this round that weren't actually like previous investors, just to sort of clarify, because they didn't exactly make it clear. So can you unpick that project a little bit for us, Ultiverse? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is sort of the stuff that happens when tokens are hot and the market's hot, and you get this sort of. I mean, we saw this before with I never get it right. Is it AOF first? No, it wasn't that one. It was the I keep saying it was the Skyark Chronicles. So we had this sort of thing before. I mean, I don't know whether this is just a coincidence or not, but both Skyark and Ultiverse are Chinese sort of companies, or Chinese run companies, maybe based in Singapore or something like that. But so it may be a bit of a cultural thing that they do this. They may not quite realise that it seems a bit more scammy in the West. I don't know, but basically both those companies have announced new funding, but then put out a sort of tweet with a logo, the logos of all their investors, and it's not been very clear that which investors are involved in this new money. And that might not seem that important, but in both cases, bizarrely, they were both originally funded. Their lead investor was Binance Labs back in the day when Binance, was sort of not quite under the same pressure it's under now. But so Binance Labs does a lot of investment, has an incubator, does a lot of stuff in Asia. But Binance Labs is very, rightly so, probably very particular about being cited in new funding rounds where it hasn't invested. So with Sky Arc, they had this whole thing that Binance Labs complained to them behind the scenes, and then the tweet was taken down. But Binance Labs actually wanted them to say they weren't involved in this new round. But the companies want to get Binance logo prominently in their socials if they're doing a new token, which of course is Ultiverse is doing. It's selling its new token. It also mentioned the valuation of the token is $150 million, which is clearly a bit of BS because the token's not live yet. So you can make up any value for a token. And people know if you're going to get listed on Binance, then there's going to be a lot of liquidity into that token. And if you're funded by Binance Labs, everyone thinks you're going to get on Binance. So it's a bit of a sort of twisted, sort of speculative selling thing going on there. So Ultiverse, I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, as a project, it seems a bit of a mess to me. I looked into it. It was very 2022, metaverse with it's going to be a AAA game, and it's going to have DeFi, and it's going to have a DEX, and it's going to and now it's got AI as well. I mean, it's just like the team have no experience in doing any of that stuff. I don't wish them ill, but I just kind of think we've seen lots of teams in blockchain and blockchain gaming in particular get a little bit excited about what they think they can do, and the reality of what they can do is a bit different. So and I kind of think in a sense, it is a feature, not a bug. I think that this sort of stuff happens in a bull market, and just people have to be very aware. Even I would say, in teams like Overworld, who are an absolutely legitimate professional team. Sometimes people can read their own enthusiasm for what they think they're going to do in terms of making money can mean they're reading sort of between the lines and thinking stuff's going to happen when maybe they should be a bit more sober on that sort of stuff. And as I say, in terms of the investment stuff we're seeing at the moment, we're in the early days. I think probably people looking to raise. Well, no one could raise money last year, or very few people could raise money. So everyone basically needs to raise money now. So just the investment space is going to get the next 6 months is going to get pretty busy, I would imagine, assuming the bull market continues. So we're going to see a lot more of this sort of stuff. So I think just people need to just be a little bit. If it looks too good to be true in terms of NFTs that are promising sort of tokens and token allocations, all this sort of stuff, it's just be a bit careful.
Yeah. And in another funding raise this week, we had Chris Heatherly's. What's it called? Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow new studio, Web3 game studio that's working on the Mystery Society, like a social deduction type Among Us kind of game. Have you looked into the game at all?
I actually got on the playlist and then never got around to actually doing it. So that was poor on my part. So I know of Chris. He's well known in the game space. He worked at Club Penguin. Actually, a lot of the team in this game worked at Club Penguin, which was bought by Disney. He then worked at Universal, doing some mobile game stuff. So he's well known in the space. It's a really nice looking game. It's a social reduction, sort of Among Us sort of vibes. Whether those. I've not really looked into detail about how they're doing blockchain, to be totally honest. And it's a fairly small raise, 3 million. It's not a massive chunk of money. So I imagine for them, it's a little bit of an experiment to sort of see what they're doing with it. But in a sense, it's good to see. It's nice. It's just refreshing to have games that aren't MMORPG trading card game, because that's there's so many of those games and the shooters as well. I guess we're getting a lot of shooters now, but just someone who's trying to do something a little bit different. And I think sometimes with blockchain, the way it allows you to build community means you can actually do some actually really interesting things in different sort of genres. So we'll see how he gets on with that. But at least in that case, I think the game will be of a quality product. Whether it gets the audience, that's always the thing no one has control over. And I don't think they won't be promising stupid, financial.
Another sort of striking thing is that with these sort of projects, you tend to just have a very clear definition of what they are, this is what you're going to get, sort of thing. It's not we're a launch pad and we're doing a little bit of this and we're integrating with that and we don't really know where this is going, but
no, I mean,
it's fairly well defined.
I think people who've made games before and know how to make games realise that it's a bit like a sculpture. You start off with a bit of stone and you're knocking stuff away, and you sort of want to hone it down to the core of what it is. The more superfluous stuff, the less focus it is. People don't know what they're doing. It's not very interesting. You need to really focus. What exactly are we doing? And and you can always, if you're successful, you always add more stuff in. When you're successful, but when you want to get to a launch, you want to get quite a tight sort of idea of what the experience is. And I think people who have played a lot of games and never made a game have the exact opposite approach, where they sort of go, "This is a nice idea, and then I could do this," and then they end up with a sprawling mess of. I mean, maybe I shouldn't call them out. I don't know. I mean, I think a prime example here is of a vision that sort of spiraled out of control because they got too much money. Was Illuvium. Illuvium, when it started out, was an auto battler chess game, which is a genre. People know how to make that. That's pretty cool, And what they've ended up is with that game, some free roaming thing where you run around like Pokemon, getting the creatures you need to play the auto chess game. A mobile companion game where you build factories that get the resources. I mean, and that purely happened because they'd never made a game before, and they raised like $200 million, and they could do whatever they wanted. And that game, they've not really released any, not really finished any of those games, and it's been 3 years. So anyway, good luck to them. I mean, but it's just a little bit. And I guess the other example would be Star Atlas, where they were doing loads of stuff and it got a bit sprawling, and then they ran out of money, and then they really focused on this very tight, fully on-chain economic simulator, which appears to have sort of worked for them. So that would be the contrary
example. We're going to run off with 2 stories. So Splinterlands announced that their tower defense Soulkeep has been acquired by its initial developer and studio Double Coconut, which is led by David Fox. So Double Coconut is the studio who's been building and developing the game so far on the Splinterlands platform, using Splinterlands tokens and cards and sort of assets. But now the kind of news is that Double Coconut will sort of be entirely in charge of its launch, tokenomics, community relationship, everything that comes with sort of owning the game. And Double Coconut has been releasing developed plenty of Web 2 games, and then a couple of Web 3 games as well. So it's a renowned, experienced game studio. It's been working on Soulkeep for about 2 years. But it's just not sort of, it's been sort of on the edge of being released before, but not it didn't happen, probably because of the sort of structural issues that Splinterlands have been sort of dealing with throughout 2023. So it's good to see that this game might now sort of move on and something might sort of come of it. Yeah. Sort of a dark themed strategy tower defense game with sort of a deep lore of some sort of some sister grievings. I'm not entirely sure actually. Something like that. Do you know more about the game than I do?
No, don't know anything about it. You're the expert on it. I think it's kind of, and obviously as you say, this sort of happened because a little bit like what we were saying before. Splinterlands got a bit over the skis on all the stuff it was going to do, and then had to focus from a business point of view on exactly what it was doing, and basically split the Splinterlands team out with the teams doing the other games and the blockchain stuff. So they split that out, and then it just sort of makes sense. They got this game that originally they would have paid Double Coconut to make for them as a contract, I'm sure, probably with the revenue split, and now Double Coconut has basically said, "Oh, we'll buy it back from you, probably at a much lower amount than they were paid to build it in the first place." But they're going to get the experience of operating a game within the Splinterlands world. And the blockchain companies, I think you want to build an ecosystem, and that means you're not in control of it. So getting another company who are going to spend some money, probably marketing through different channels, whatever. But it's built within the Splinterlands universe, using their NFTs, using their tokens, basically what.
And they've already got sort of a fairly big audience because of Splinterland's kind of ecosystem or in community already. Like I would say a big chunk of that are going to be interested in playing the game. So
of course, I think if you own Splinterland's card, you're going to want to check it out. I mean, maybe some people really hate tower defense games. I mean, I'm not a massive fan, but if I've got Splinterland's cards, I'm sort of try it out. I mean, why wouldn't I? I mean, it's
Good. Lastly, Come to Us has been announcing that they are building a verse on the Oasys, the Japanese gaming blockchain Oasys, which they're going to call XPLA verse, which is basically going to bring some of the titles that are on XPLA into the Japanese market and deploy on the Oasys blockchain, like basically building a layer 2, isn't it, chain on the Oasys ecosystem. And it's starting with these 2 titles, the Summoner's War Chronicles, and which is the other one,
The Walking Dead All Stars.
Yes, thank you. Right, have you got anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess one of the interesting thing, or the question mark still with Oasys. Oasys is a blockchain out of Japan. Basically, got pretty much, not all, but a lot of the Japanese big game developers are sort of part of it. It's their first experiment with blockchain. They're not really a lot has happened with it. But it was never very clear to me, is this a blockchain purely for the Japanese market, or is this a blockchain to go global? I think it's increasingly becoming clear that it's focused on the Japanese market. And so Come to Us, who has its own blockchain, XPlay, and has those 2 games that you announced, you mentioned, have been live on its own blockchain for 6 months.
Got plenty of other games live as well on XPlay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But those are the two big brands. So it's not a question of getting these games on the blockchain. It's a question of, and people in Japan could play them on on XPlay. But it's a case of they see Oasys as having really good links into the Japanese market. And so, as you say, Oasys has this slightly odd situation where basically Oasys is its own blockchain, its own L1, but then companies can launch their own what they call verses. So in this case, they're calling it the XPlay verse, and that's its own L2 based on the Oasys L1. It's more like I guess a discovery mechanic. But basically, Come to Us will be presumably releasing more of its games through this hub. It's not clear to me at all that anyone is playing any of the games on Oasys at the moment. I guess the big one they're waiting for is the Ubisoft one. And Ubisoft seem to be having some. Ubisoft don't seem to be the most fast-moving company when it comes to this. But anyway, we'll see how that plays out. So, but yeah, it's I guess it's a little bit about people start off going, blockchain's universal. Anyone in the world can jump on this blockchain and play the game on it, which is true. But obviously, if you can provide, if you can sort of focus an experience for specific markets, and the Japanese market is notorious for being not very open to foreign games. I mean, they have a very, very clear gaming culture in Japan. Of exactly the art style they want. So Japanese anime is different to South Korean anime, which is very different to Chinese anime. I'm not an expert, but I know that much, And the Japanese gaming market is enormous, but it's basically very closed and insular. So it is worth having. I can see why Oasys could be successful just being the blockchain for the Japanese market, and everyone sort of brings their game to Oasys.
And in a sense, that's why it was a little bit surprising that Ubisoft announced, their first proper Web3 title, Champions Tactics.
Yeah, because that's not
would deploy on there, but it seems perhaps they will deploy on some other blockchains as well, that are a bit more Western focused. But
no, we'll see. I mean, because the Champions, what's it called? Champions Chronicles is not a Japanese. It's a Western game. It's not. I mean, it's not Japanese people wouldn't play it, but it's not a Japanese designed game. It's culturally and art wise, it's not. It wouldn't particularly appeal to the Japanese market. I would say. So we wait and see what happens.
Right. Well, on that note, we're going to finish off, and thank you very much for listening, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.